Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Chantel and I am going to today do a couple of book reviews. I haven't really done like a proper sort of standalone book review in a while, and I feel like October has been a pretty big reading month for me, so I'm going to have a lot of books to talk about in my October wrap-up video. And so I'd like to sort of pull out a couple of those books and do like a little bit of a longer, more detailed review of a couple of them, just so that I don't have to so that hopefully my October wrap-up video won't be super duper long, because I'm going to have quite a few books to talk about in that video. So I'm going to have to keep those little recaps pretty short. So I thought I would just pull out a couple of the sort of bigger titles from October that I read and just do a little bit more of a longer form review. There might be some minor spoilers for these books as I talk about them. I'm not going to be giving away like any major plot developments, but I will definitely be referring to some things in a little bit more detail and possibly doing some quotes, particularly from Madship, that, you might consider it spoilery if you have not read the book. And so you might want to like watch this with a bit of care if you have not read these books, and are, wanting to read them and like wanting to go into them with no spoilers at all. Like I said, I'm not going to spoil anything like huge, any major like surprises from the end of the book or whatever, but watch at your own risk. I will probably put some sort of a minor spoiler type warning or tag on this video, so that you can make your own decisions about what you want to watch, etc., etc. So the two books, I'm going to talk about two books in this video. The first I'm going to talk about is Madship by Robin Hobb, and the second I'm going to talk about is The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. So stay tuned for those two. First up, I would like to discuss Madship by Robin Hobb. So this is book 2 of the Live Ship Traders trilogy, and so as I said, my review might have a little bit of minor spoilers in it, especially if you've not read even the first book in the Live Ship Traders trilogy. Probably want to give this a pass until you've at least read Ship of Magic. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I'm pretty sure I gave it a full 5 stars on Storygraph. So this one, in my opinion, surpasses Ship of Destiny. I did enjoy Ship of Destiny, but it was a little bit more of a slow going. But then once we get into the meat of Madship, it really, for me at least, sort of takes off. As you're probably aware, if you spend any time on Booktube, Robin Hobb is kind of a Booktube darling, and in my opinion, this is with very good reason. I think she's quite a good writer. Her books are rather slow burn, so if you're, more into the sort of action-heavy, plot-heavy kind of books, then you might have a problem with her books. It might not be for you as much, but for me personally, I'm very much a person who enjoys a heavily character-driven narrative and a heavily introspective narrative, and I really appreciate good prose, and I like a slow burn plot that maybe doesn't come together until much later in a narrative. And so for me, Robin Hobb's works in the realm of the Elderling series so far, at least, has been working for me very, very well. I said before in my sort of mini review of Ship of Destiny, or Ship of Magic, sorry, Ship of Destiny is the third book, Ship of Magic, that, I can kind of understand why some people have some issues with Live Ship Traders as compared to the Farseer trilogy, which was the previous trilogy in this series. I can kind of understand that. Obviously, if you get super invested in Fitz in particular, then you might have a problem with live ship traders because Fitz isn't in this one. So first and foremost, there's no Fitz, right? So if you really like Fitz, and Fitz is really what draws you to these books, then you might have a problem with this. And also, I do feel like Hobb is very much not interested in writing characters who are likable, right? She's much more interested, and this is true also of Fitz. Like, I often find Fitz very frustrating in the Farseer trilogy. There are times when I kind of wanted to throw my book across the room because I thought Fitz was being an idiot, right? And Hobb really continues the trend in the live ship traders. Many, if not most of these characters are probably not people that I would want to spend time with or be friends with if I knew them in real life. Many of them are very much not that. I personally am fine with that. I prefer fictional characters who are interesting, who are nuanced, who are complicated, who have weaknesses and strengths, who are quote-unquote problematic, and who sometimes maybe make bad decisions. I like characters who act in their own self-interest and not necessarily in the interest of other people. I'm always really interested in that. So people like Kenneth, people like Althea, people like Malta, I find really interesting. Again, I might not want to hang out with them or be friends with them in real life, but I sure as shit do like reading about them because I think they're interesting. Malta's storyline in particular in this book became very quickly one of my favorites. She was one of my favorites in the first book as well, but like it got so much more interesting as this book went on that I was just absolutely enthralled. Every time I got a chapter with some Malta POV in it, I was like, yes, this is what I want. Living in her head is so interesting to me. She is such a frustrating adolescent teenager who puts her father on a pedestal and sees him through these rose-colored glasses, in large part because he's never really been there. He's never been much of a disciplinarian. He's clearly left everything to her mother in terms of actually raising her, and therefore he can sort of act like, you know, he's her buddy, right? He's, in a way, he's almost her first, in a weird way, he's almost like her first boyfriend in a sense, because she's able to sort of practice her little tricks and her little flirtations on him in such a way that, you know, she's able to wrap him around her little finger, basically, in a way that she then translates into her flirtations with other men around her, right? And yeah, there was a point in the book where I was literally like texting my friend and was like, this girl, she just seems like a sociopath. And it was wild. And then, you know, her again, I don't want to get into spoilers, but her storyline takes such a turn in the middle of the book that it just becomes wildly interesting to me. And yeah, someone like Kenneth, I find really a really compelling character. Again, not somebody I would want to be friends with, but I think he's very interesting, and I think Hobbs' use of him and this interesting sort of love square quad between Kenneth, Wintrow, Etta, and Vivacia, the ship, is really, really interesting and compelling in a situation in which I don't normally like a sort of contrived love triangle-ish thing, but considering that Vivacia is a live ship, and Etta and Wintrow have a really interesting dynamic between the two of them that is not really sexual at all. Wintrow is clearly like, you know, he's smitten with her because he's an adolescent boy and he's just starting to realize that women are a thing for the first time. But like but it's not really a sexual thing between them. And Kenneth is kind of trying to push them together for reasons of his own while he is sort of flirting with the live ship. It's a really just fascinating bit of interplay between those characters. And another thing that I really liked about Mad Ship was, honestly, this trope that I particularly enjoy, which is when a very competent woman puts a very inept man in his place and makes him realize that he's probably very much in the wrong. And this happens at least a couple of times in this book, and I feel like Robin Hobb is particularly good at writing these things. I even have a couple of examples that I marked. So this one is, these are both pretty early in the book, like in the first half of the book. They should not contain really any spoilers. But yeah, this first passage is Etta and Wintro on the live ship Vivacia. Vivacia? I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm reading the books in print, so I don't know how any of these words are pronounced. But anyway, so this is Etta to Wintro. You can't go back, she told him bluntly. Her voice was neither kind nor unkind. That part of your life is over. Set it aside as something you have finished. Complete or no, it is done with you. No being gets to decide what his life is supposed to be. She lifted her eyes, and her gaze stabbed him. Be a man. Discover where you are now, and go on from there, making the best of things. Accept your life, and you might survive it. If you hold back from it, insisting this is not your life, not where you are meant to be, life will pass you by. You may not die from such foolishness, but you might as well be dead for all the good your life will do you or anyone else. Wintro was stunned. Heartless as her words were, they brimmed with wisdom. Almost reflexively, he sank into meditation breathing, as if this were a teaching direct from Saw's scrolls. He explored her idea, following it to its logical conclusions, and then he gets a whole sort of internal monologue about how he's, dealing with this, and eventually he asks Etta where she learned this wisdom, and she tells him, in a brothel. And I love that scene. I thought that was great, sort of, boy, you need to grow up kind of situation. I have a lot of sympathy for Wintro, but also, as with many of the characters in Robin Hobb's novels, he puts himself in some situations unthinkingly that he then has a hard time getting back out of again, and sometimes it's hard to have sympathy for him when he does those things. And then a second scene that's very much in that vein is a little bit later in the book, but still sort of in the first half, is between Amber and Brashen. And I have to admit, Brashen is probably not my favorite character in this book. I think he's a little bit boring. I think he's one of the least interesting characters in the book. But Amber I love, and I really love this particular kind of argument that Amber and Brashen have, particularly regarding the live ship Paragon. So this is Brashen speaking. There is nothing I can do. I don't know what the ship or Althea Vestrit told you about me to make you think I have some kind of influence, but it's not true. The truth is the opposite. Anything I support, proper Bingtowners will righteously oppose. I'm as much of an outcast as that ship. Your cause is more likely to succeed without me. He shook his head at her. Not that I think it can succeed at all. So, I should just give up now? She asked mildly. Just let him spiral down into madness until the new traders come to haul him away and chop him up? What will we say to one another afterwards, Brashen? That there was nothing we could do, that we never believed it would really happen? Will that make us innocent? Innocent? He was incensed at her suggestion he was somehow responsible for this mess. I've done nothing wrong. I intend nothing wrong. I am innocent. Half the evil in this world occurs while decent people stand by and do nothing wrong. It's not enough to refrain from evil, Trell. People have to attempt to do right, even if they believe they cannot succeed. So yeah, just speaking truths as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, Mad Ship is really good. 5 stars, would recommend. I think if you're not reading Robin Hobb, you probably should. I'm thoroughly enjoying my experience with The Realm of the Elderlings and with the live ship traders in particular. And I will say, like, a lot of what I really enjoy about this comes down to the world building and sort of the background information that is gradually building up over time, over the course of reading these books, from the first trilogy through to this one, and starting to understand more about how the magic and the history of this world works, and particularly the connections between the Wizardwood, the sea serpents, the dragons, the elderlings, and sort of how that's all starting to come together is happening very organically in a way that works for me very well, and is the opposite of just like an info dump or a big long exposition piece of exposition. It's working for me very well organically over time, and it's very satisfying, basically, is what I'm saying. So yeah, these books are very interesting, narratively very satisfying. I'm enjoying the heck out of them. So yeah, that's Mad Ship by Robin Hobb. Okay, apologies if you heard my dog barking there. He gets that way sometimes. So the second book I want to talk about is another sort of new to me author, and that is The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. Now, much like Robin Hobb, I have seen many a YouTuber raving about Joe Abercrombie. And so much like with Robin Hobb, I went into this book with pretty high expectations. I've seen more than one person on YouTube talking about, saying things like, nobody writes like Joe Abercrombie, or I've never been able to find anybody who does what Joe Abercrombie does, kinds of things. Just sort of talking about him as if he's, particularly unique and particularly special amongst fantasy, and particularly amongst grimdark fantasy writers. And so I definitely went into this with some relatively high expectations. And I think that may have affected my rating a little bit. I think there's a little bit of a danger to that sometimes when you go into something that's been so highly recommended. Sometimes you get lucky, as I did with Robin Hobb this year, where her books have largely met and even exceeded my already high expectations, and she's quickly become one of my favorite writers. But there's also a danger that even if the book is solid, it may not live up to those already very high expectations and feel even more disappointing by comparison to some extent. And I think that might be what part of the problem was for me with The Blade Itself. I'm going to say I did not dislike The Blade Itself. I think The Blade Itself is a solid debut novel, because I'm pretty sure it was his debut. So I think it's pretty solid. I gave it a 3.75 stars on Storygraph, which is a little bit low for me, but not super low. And I'm going to explain a little bit about why. Again, I think it's pretty solid. By the end of it, I was into it, and I'm interested to see where he goes with it. Definitely. I did also listen to the audiobook, again, on the recommendation of many people. I listened to it on audio, and I'm glad that I did. I really enjoyed the audiobook and the narrator. I think he did a great job. And I'll probably listen to the rest of the trilogy on audio as well. I did have a few issues with it. First of all, it took me a little while to really get into it. I think some of that may have been, again, just sort of matching the expectations that I had with the reality of the book, and particularly the opening chapters of the book, trying to find where they were at and sort of manage to, level that out a little bit. I think it took me a little bit to do that. And also, I think there are a few things that are, I feel like, that seem to be sort of quirks of him as a debut author specifically, that hopefully, that at least, that to me, seemed to sort of smooth themselves out as the book went along, and hopefully will be resolved in later books. Particularly, I think he has a tendency in the beginning of the book to over-explain things to his own detriment at times. What I mean by this is, particularly, I noticed in some of Glocta's early chapters, he kind of does this thing where he'll have the third person narrator will like explain a bit about Glocta's backstory, and then Glocta will explain about that backstory in his internal monologue, and then a little bit later Glocta will explain it in dialogue to another character, and that's at that point that's the third time I've heard that bit of backstory, and I don't need to hear it 3 times. I just don't. I only really need to hear it once, maybe twice, if you want to really emphasize the point. You don't need to do it more than that, especially not within like the same chapter within a few pages of each other. You don't have to do that. That to me is an author who is extremely concerned about making sure his readers understand certain things about his characters, but he doesn't fully trust his readers at this point. And you got to trust your readers a little bit more. I'm a grown-up. I read a lot of books. You can trust me to pick up what you're putting down the first time. You don't have to emphasize your point. There were, in fact, a couple of scenes in some of Glocta's early chapters where I felt like, as I was listening to it, that like this scene would have been more effective if he had left that explanation to this scene, right? So there's a scene when Glocta is like interrogating somebody and like explaining some of his backstory to this person, and I was thinking at that point, I'm like, I've heard this backstory a couple of times already now, and if I had not heard it at this point, this scene would be a lot more effective. Like, you can save some of your stuff. You don't have to info dump me several times. So that was a problem that I was having, but it did kind of resolve itself and go away after a certain point. It might have been that I just stopped noticing it, but also I think after a certain point, Abercrombie's like, okay, you know you get the basics of these characters, and now I'm gonna actually like move forward a little bit now with these arcs and this plot, and it's gonna be fine. So hopefully that'll continue to be resolved and not be as much of a stumbling block in later books. And like, honestly, the main issue for me that really kept it from being a full 4 stars was the female characters. I'm gonna be honest here. I mean, I can only think of 2 named female characters in this whole book, and only one of them is a POV character. And I'm sorry, but as far as I'm concerned, if you're writing a sprawling, epic, slow burn kind of a story with multiple POV characters from multiple stations in life, right? You've got upper class people, you've got lower class people, you've got people who used to be upper class and are now sort of lower class, you've got a mix, you've got some people from different cultures and different geographical areas who are POV characters. But you can only manage to give me one woman POV character in this entire book, and you don't introduce her until almost the second half of the book, until almost halfway through. That's a problem. Like, that's really the bare minimum. Like, this is the bar is on the floor and you're just barely tripping over it kind of situation. So like, he needs to do better. Frankly, he needs to do a lot better on that front in future books. I have no problem with Audie as a character. I think she's a fine character, and she's not a POV character. I think she should be a POV character. Pharaoh is the female POV character, and I also don't have a problem with her necessarily. I think she could be more interesting, but like, we need to do better than this. We need to do better than this. You know, if a woman wrote a book like this and had 0 male POV characters, like, everyone would be in an uproar about it. So like, this is not, you know, you need to do better. But, you know, there were a lot of things that I did like about it. I do like Glocta as a character. I do like the POV characters that we have. I enjoy all of them. Logan is especially a character that really trips a lot of my triggers in terms of the tropes and the kind of arc that he's on. I'm super into the guy with the bad stuff in his past. I've done very bad things. I'm trying to do better. I'm trying to be on a path of redemption. I want to be better. I'm trying to be a good person, but I have so many bad things in my past. That's really my kind of guy. Really my kind of guy. So I'm super invested in Logan. And I am interested to see where the story goes. It's a very slow burn story. I can understand how that could be off-putting to some people. I personally don't mind that. Again, I'm a Robin Hobb girly. I am reading a lot of stuff that's heavily character driven and super slow burn. I don't have a problem with a plot that takes a while to get going. That doesn't bother me at all. I think it's solid. I think it's a good start. I'm looking forward to seeing where he goes with it. I think he needs to work out a few things in the future. If he's gonna become like one of my favorite writers, like if he's gonna be on a par with my guy George, he's got to get some more interesting female characters in there, right? That's why I like George so much, is because he has so many great female POV characters. And, you know, it's not that hard. We're not weird aliens from another planet. We're just people, you know? Just treat us like people. Just treat us like you would any other character, and put a few more of us in there, and you'll be fine, right? So that's my, you know, somewhat more moderated review of Joe Abercrombie, The Blade itself. I used that to replace Malice by John Gwynne in my fantasy bingo board for the multi-POV prompt. Because, as I said before, my library does not have that series. Malice by John Gwynne does not have that series. And I'm probably not going to be able to purchase it for a while. So I switched it out with The Blade itself and read that instead. And I did enjoy it. I'm looking forward to reading the rest of the First Law trilogy and seeing where that goes. Very interested in the world building. Super interested in several of the characters. I'm really looking forward to seeing where it goes. Hopefully he, you know, again, he just needs to do better with his female characters, basically. If he can just get over that hurdle, he'll probably be pretty good. And I do also want to say a thing or two about the humor, because, again, I've heard a lot of things about Joe Abercrombie's humorous writing style, like the dark humor that he infuses in his books. And I have to admit, again, it took me a while to really start to even see any of that in this book. It did eventually come around, I think, particularly when Logan and the two magic guys came to the big city. And then we did the whole Logan is like a fish out of water, in over his head kind of situation in this sort of more quote-unquote civilized society. That stuff was pretty funny. But I'm hoping for a little more humor going forward. That might just be because, like, I had just finished reading a Terry Pratchett book before I read The Blade itself. That I just, like, I don't see where the humor is. Or maybe it's just because my sense of humor is different from Joe Abercrombie's. I don't know. We'll see. As I said, it's a solid start, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes. But, like, so far, I would say he's not, like, an immediate new favorite writer of mine. I would say he's solidly decent, and I'll keep reading him because what he's got is pretty good, but it's not like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing I've read in a long time. At least not yet. Hopefully, you know, I'd like to get to that point if you know, he becomes much better. But yeah, we'll see. So yeah, those are my 2 book reviews for the week. And yeah, the next video will probably be my October wrap-up. I have no idea when that's gonna be. Hopefully in another week, maybe, if I can come out of my Dragon Age shell eventually. I'm actually recording this pretty early, like almost a full week in advance, because I know by the time the next weekend rolls around, I'm going to be not wanting to take any time to record any videos, so I'm recording this in advance. But yeah, what do you think of Robin Hobb, the Live Ship Traders trilogy? What do you think of First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie? Am I way off base with these writers? Is Joe Abercrombie going to get much better and become one of my faves? Let me know in the comments. Like, subscribe to the video, the usual stuff, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.